The fluorescent lights in the Morrison Steel boardroom cast harsh shadows across 8 faces, all men, all over 50, all skeptical. Catherine Morrison Reese, to the handful who dared use it, stood at the head of the table, her navy Armani suit crisp enough to cut glass, her spine straighter than the I-beams forged 3 floors below. The presentation clicker felt cold in her palm. Behind her, the projector displayed quarterly earnings in unforgiving red. Martin Lancaster leaned back in his leather chair. Fingers steepled his silver hair, gleaming under the overhead lights. 20 years at Morrison Steel had taught him exactly when to strike. His voice carried the weight of manufactured concern. The numbers don't lie, Reese. Third quarter loss of $8.2 million. Fourth quarter projections worse. We're hemorrhaging cash. The spreadsheet on screen told a story Martin had been carefully crafting for 18 months. Equipment failures up 40%. Maintenance costs spiraling. Production delays costing contracts. Every data point a nail in the coffin of a company that had stood for 80 years. Reese's jaw tightened. Temporary setbacks. The Navy contract bid will take 6 months minimum to finalize. Martin slid a bound proposal across the mahogany table. Titan Industries has made a formal offer, $800 million, 40% above current market valuation. They'll retain 70% of the workforce, honor existing pensions. Douglas Hendricks, the board chairman and her father's oldest friend, lifted the document with age-spotted hands. His silence spoke volumes. 30%. Reese's voice cut through the room like forged steel. You just said they'll retain 70%, which means 200 workers lose everything. 200 families. Men who've given decades to this company. Martin's smile never reached his eyes. Reese, I understand this is emotional for you. George built something remarkable, but sentiment doesn't pay bills. Your father would want us to make the smart business decision. The invocation of her father's name landed like a physical blow. George Morrison had been dead 3 years, his heart giving out at his desk, still reviewing production schedules at 71. The office still smelled faintly of his cigars, though Reese had never smoked. My father built this company on the backs of skilled workers, not corporate raiders looking to strip assets. Her voice remained level, professional, even as fury coiled in her chest. I won't sell. Not to Titan, not to anyone. Then you're letting emotion cloud judgment. Martin stood, buttoning his suit jacket. Gentlemen, I move we table this discussion for 2 weeks. Give our CEO time to review the offer rationally. The vote was unanimous. Reese gathered her materials, each movement precise, controlled. Only when the boardroom door clicked shut behind her did she allow her hands to shake. 15 miles across Pittsburgh, in the heart of Morrison Steel's main production facility, Brennan Sullivan didn't have time for trembling hands. The hydraulic press, 50 tons of unforgiving steel and pressure, had stopped mid-cycle 4 hours ago. The Kellerman contract required 1,200 custom I-beams by Friday. It was Wednesday afternoon. Pressure valves shot. Tommy Rizzo, 20 years younger and half as experienced, wiped grease from his hands. We need a new one. 3-day shipping minimum. Brennan lay on his back beneath the machine work light clenched between his teeth, studying the failed component. Sweat soaked through his denim shirt despite the November chill that crept through the facility's high windows. Above him, the press loomed like a sleeping giant capable of crushing a man to nothing in less than a second. We don't have 3 days. His voice echoed in the confined space. We have 36 hours before Kellerman pulls the contract and Morrison loses $2.3 million. Frank Russo appeared at the edge of his Vision steel-toed boots, planted wide arms crossed over a chest that had been lifting steel since before Brennan was born. 62 years old, 40 of them at Morrison, foreman of the fabrication division, and the closest thing to a father figure Brennan had known since his own dad passed. Sullivan, you planning to rebuild that valve from scratch? Frank's voice carried Brooklyn edges worn smooth by decades in Pittsburgh. Because unless you got a miracle in your toolbox, we're looking at shutdown. Brennan rolled out from under the press, stood stretched muscles tight from 4 hours of diagnostic work. His coveralls bore the stains of a dozen different jobs, his hands the scars of twice as many. At 35, he'd been working with his hands since he could hold a wrench. Boeing had wanted those hands once, had paid him 6 figures to design aircraft components in climate-controlled offices. That life belonged to someone else now, someone who still had a wife waiting at home. Valve seats cracked, not the valve itself. He pulled a notepad from his pocket, sketched quickly. If I machine a new seat from the spare parts inventory, reinforce it with a custom gasket, recalibrate the pressure sensors, we can have her running by midnight. Tommy whistled low. That's not standard procedure. Engineering would never approve. Engineering isn't here. Brennan checked his watch. 3:15. He had to pick up Harper from Louise Crawford's house by 6, had promised his 7-year-old daughter they'd work on her science fair project tonight. The water filtration system she'd been building for a week, her small hands mimicking the careful precision she'd watched him use 1,000 times. Frank, I need authorization to pull from parts inventory, and I need Tommy on overtime to help with the rebuild. Frank studied him for a long moment, eyes that had seen 3 generations of Morrison ownership weighing risk against necessity. Finally he nodded. Your neck if it fails. It won't fail. The words carried the quiet certainty of a man who knew machines better than he knew people, who could diagnose a problem by the pitch of a failing bearing, who had learned through 12 years of hands-on work that engineering degrees meant nothing compared to understanding how metal moved, how pressure distributed, how tolerances shifted under heat and stress. By 5:30, Brennan had the replacement seat machined and fitted. By 5:45, his phone buzzed with a text from Louise Harper, fed and happy, take your time. By 6, he was elbow-deep in hydraulic fluid, Tommy feeding him tools, Frank supervising with the practiced eye of a man who'd seen too many shortcuts end in disaster. They didn't hear the footsteps on the production floor, didn't register the click of heels on concrete until a voice, crisp, feminine, edged with authority, cut through the mechanical symphony of the facility. What's the status on the Kellerman order? Brennan froze, torque wrench halfway through tightening a critical bolt. He knew that voice, had heard it 2 months ago in a conference room dismissing his preventive maintenance proposal with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never had grease under her fingernails. Ma'am, we're in the middle of... Frank started. I asked about the Kellerman order. Reese Morrison stood 10 feet away, tablet in hand. Her suit jacket gone, but her spine still rigid, her dark hair pulled back in a style that screamed expensive salon. The board wants an update. I need numbers. Brennan didn't look up, didn't stop working. The bolt required exactly 18 foot-pounds of torque. No more, no less. Too tight, and the gasket would fail. Too loose, and the entire assembly would blow apart under pressure. His world had narrowed to the feeling of metal against metal, the incremental click of the wrench. Sir, Reese's voice sharpened, I'm speaking to you, and I'm keeping this facility from losing a $2 million contract. Brennan finished the torque sequence, set the wrench down with deliberate care, finally looked up. So unless you know how to rebuild a hydraulic valve seat, I'd appreciate you not breaking my concentration. The silence that followed could have been measured in geological time. Tommy took 3 steps backward. Frank's weathered face remained carefully neutral. Reese's eyes, the same steel gray as the I-beams her company forged, locked onto Brennan's. Recognition flickered. The maintenance proposal. The engineer who spoke like a mechanic who'd dared suggest that frontline workers understood operational efficiency better than management consultants. Do you know who I am? I know you're standing between me and a repair that needs to be done in the next 90 minutes. Brennan pulled a rag from his pocket, wiped his hands. And I know that if I don't get this press running by midnight, 50 families lose their jobs when Kellerman walks. So with respect, ma'am, who you are, matters a whole lot less than what I'm doing. Color rose in Reese's cheeks. Her fingers tightened on the tablet until the knuckles went white. In the boardroom, men twice her age still flinched when she raised her voice. In the corner office her father had occupied, executives worth millions had stammered apologies for lesser infractions. We'll discuss this in my office, tomorrow morning, 8 sharp. She turned on her heel, each step precise and furious. Only after she'd disappeared through the production floor doors did Tommy exhale. Jesus Christ, Brennan, that was the CEO. You just told the CEO to get lost. Frank shook his head. something that might have been respect or might have been pity crossing his lined face. "Kid, you got stones. Stupid stones, but stones." He clapped Brennan on the shoulder. "Finish the repair, but tomorrow you might want to update your resume." Brennan returned to the press. The valve seat seated perfectly, the gasket compression within tolerances, the hydraulic fluid flowing smooth and clean through lines he'd bled 3 times to eliminate air pockets. By 11:47, the press completed its first test cycle. By midnight, Tommy was running the first I-beam for the Kellerman order. Brennan drove home through empty Pittsburgh streets, his truck's heater fighting the November cold, his mind already shifting gears to Harper. She'd be asleep by now in the small bedroom of their small house, her science project spread across the kitchen table, waiting for the attention he'd promised. The guilt was familiar, comfortable, almost like the ache in his lower back from lying under heavy machinery. The house was dark except for the porch light Louise always left burning. Her own small ranch sat 50 yards away, separated by a chain-link fence Harper had learned to climb by age 5. For 3 years, Louise Crawford had been grandmother babysitter and lifeline, a widow whose own children had scattered to opposite coasts, who'd claimed Harper as the granddaughter she saw twice a year if she was lucky. Brennan found Harper asleep on the couch, covered with the Afghan Sarah had crocheted 6 months before the accident, before the drunk driver, before single fatherhood became the defining feature of his existence. Louise sat in the recliner reading glasses perched on her nose, a paperback Western novel in her lap. "Press fixed?" she asked without looking up. "For now." Harper waited up until 9, "Wanted to show you the filter design." The guilt sharpened into something with edges. "I'll work on it with her tomorrow, promise." Louise closed her book, studied him over the reading glasses with eyes that missed nothing. "That girl thinks you hung the moon, Brennan. Don't make her start wondering if maybe you hung it too high to reach." He carried Harper to bed, her small weight impossibly precious in his arms. 7 years old, dark curls like her mother, stubborn chin like her father, brilliant mind entirely her own. She stirred as he tucked the blankets around her eyes, opening halfway. "Did you fix it, Daddy?" "Fixed it." "You always fix things." She yawned, already sinking back toward sleep. "That's your superpower." He kissed her forehead, turned off the lamp, stood in the doorway watching her breathe. If fixing things was his superpower, he'd failed at the most important repair of all. Couldn't fix the drunk driver's car before it ran the red light. Couldn't fix the internal injuries that stole Sarah away in the ambulance before they reached the hospital. Couldn't fix the hole in Harper's life where a mother should have been. Downstairs, Harper's water filtration project covered the kitchen table. PVC pipes, activated charcoal, sand, gravel, all arranged with the methodical precision of a mind that understood systems. The design was sound, better than sound. Advanced for a second grader, the kind of project that won science fairs and earned teacher praise. Brennan sat down, pulled the design notebook toward him, saw Harper's careful notes in purple marker. "Dad says clean water matters. Dad says you can't drink money." The word stabbed something in his chest. His phone buzzed. Email notification. Subject line, mandatory meeting. 8:00 a.m., CEO, office. He deleted it, turned back to Harper's project. Tomorrow would bring whatever tomorrow brought. Tonight he could at least plan how to help his daughter prove that solutions came from understanding problems, not from degrees on walls. The next morning arrived with freezing rain and the weight of exhaustion. Brennan had managed 4 hours of sleep, interrupted by dreams of hydraulic presses and Sarah's laugh, the two somehow tangled together in that way grief has of making everything touch everything else. Harper bounced through breakfast with the resilient energy of childhood, chattering about her friend Kayla's birthday party on Saturday, about the spelling test she'd aced, about whether goldfish could drink filtered water. "Can we work on the project tonight?" she asked, pulling on her backpack at the front door. "Mrs. Peterson says we present next Friday." "Tonight for sure." The promise left his mouth before his brain could catalog all the ways work might interfere. "No matter what." Louise appeared on her front porch, as if summoned, wrapped in a purple fleece against the November chill. "Morning, kiddo. You ready to make some Thursday magic?" Harper ran across the wet grass, backpack bouncing, and Brennan was left with another wave of gratitude for the woman who asked for nothing and gave everything. He waved, climbed into his truck, pointed it toward Morrison Steel, and whatever consequences 8 o'clock would bring. The CEO's office occupied the top floor of the administrative building, all glass and steel and panoramic views of Pittsburgh's rivers. Brennan had never been higher than the second floor where HR processed his paperwork and deposited his paychecks. The elevator ride felt like ascending into foreign territory. The secretary, Margaret Hayes, according to the nameplate, looked up from her computer with the kind of professional smile that conveyed zero actual warmth. She was 50-something, gray hair, cut in a sensible bob, wearing pearls that probably cost more than Brennan's mortgage payment. "Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Morrison is expecting you." She gestured toward the heavy oak door. "Go right in." The office was exactly what he'd expected: minimalist furniture, abstract art that probably meant something to people who studied such things, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Monongahela River. What he hadn't expected was the chaos. File boxes covered every surface. Spreadsheets papered one entire wall, connected by lines of red marker forming a web of financial carnage. Reese Morrison stood in the center of it all. Blazer discarded sleeves rolled to her elbows, looking like a general surveying a losing battlefield. She turned as he entered, and her expression cycled through surprise, embarrassment, and finally settled on something like defiant professionalism. "Mr. Sullivan." She gestured vaguely at the disaster surrounding them. "Thank you for coming." Didn't seem optional. A ghost of something amusement maybe flickered across her face before she crushed it. "Close the door." He did. The silence that followed felt loaded with more than just yesterday's confrontation. "The Kellerman beams shipped this morning." Reese moved to her desk, pulled up a production report on her computer. "On time. Above specifications. Frank Russo's report credits your improvised repair for saving the contract." Brennan waited. There was a but coming. There was always a but. "The engineering department is formally reprimanding you for unauthorized modification of safety-critical equipment." There it was. "And I'm overriding them." Reese closed the laptop, faced him directly. "Because losing $2 million would have cost us a lot more than a non-standard repair." The admission clearly cost her something. Her jaw worked like she was chewing glass. "You came here to tell me I'm not fired." "I came here to tell you I was wrong." The words came out clipped professional, but beneath them ran a current of something raw. "2 months ago you presented a preventive maintenance proposal. I rejected it, called it gut feeling from a mechanic who didn't understand the bigger picture." Brennan remembered Martin Lancaster's condescending questions, remembered the snickers from the engineering managers, remembered Reese's ice-cold dismissal. "Morrison Steel needs solutions with scientific basis, not gut feeling. The Kellerman press failed because we've been running reactive maintenance instead of preventive." Reese pulled a file from the chaos, handed it to him. "I pulled equipment failure data from the last 18 months. 40% increase in breakdowns. Each one costing us time, money, contracts." He opened the file, scanned the numbers. The pattern was obvious to anyone who'd spent time on the production floor. Machines pushed past recommended service intervals, warning signs ignored small problems, allowed to cascade into catastrophic failures. Someone's been cutting the maintenance budget. It wasn't a question. Martin Lancaster, our CFO. He's been systematically reducing operational expenses, creating a narrative of declining efficiency to support selling the company. Reese's voice carried edges sharp enough to cut. "And I almost let it work because I was too busy trying to prove I deserved this office to see what was happening 3 floors down." Brennan closed the file, set it on the desk. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need help." The admission seemed to physically pain her. "Your original proposal, the full version, not the 10-minute summary you presented, I want to see it, all of it. Implementation timeline, cost projections, expected ROI, everything." "You rejected it. Called it unscientific." "I was wrong." She met his eyes, and in that moment she looked less like an untouchable CEO and more like someone drowning in water over her head. "My father built this company from the ground up. Started as a machinist, worked every job before he inherited it from my grandfather. He understood the production floor in a way I never have, and I'm watching everything he built circle the drain because I was too proud to listen to the people who actually do the work. The honesty landed like a punch. Brennan had spent 2 months nursing anger at her dismissal, had painted her in his mind as the kind of executive who saw workers as line items on spreadsheets. But the woman in front of him now looked nothing like that. She looked tired, scared, desperate. "The full proposal is at home. I can bring it tomorrow." "I need it today." Reese checked her watch. "The board meets again in 2 weeks. If I'm going to fight Martin's sale, I need ammunition. Real solutions, not promises." Brennan thought of Harper, of his promise to work on her project tonight without fail. Thought of Louise, who'd already given so much. Thought of the 50 families who'd lose everything if Morrison Steel went under. "I'll bring it at 6, after I spend time with my daughter." Something shifted in Reese's expression, softened. "You have a daughter. Harper, 7. She's building a water filtration system for her science fair." He didn't know why he added that detail, but it felt important. "I promised her tonight. I don't break promises to her." Reese's throat worked. "My son is 7. Finn. He asked me to come to show and tell this morning. I sent my nanny instead because I had this meeting." She looked away, jaw tight. "I break promises to him constantly." The revelation sat between them like a living thing. 2 single parents, 2 7-year-olds, 2 different worlds connected by guilt and duty and the impossible mathematics of work-life balance. 6 o'clock then. Reese's professional mask reasserted itself. "Bring the proposal. We'll go through it together." Brennan turned to leave, hand on the doorknob, when her voice stopped him. "Mr. Sullivan Brennan." She corrected herself with visible effort. "Thank you for saving the Kellerman contract, and for not walking out yesterday when I was being a CEO, an ass." The word sounded foreign in her boardroom accent, and despite everything, Brennan felt his mouth quirk. "Yeah, a little." He left her standing in her war room of spreadsheets and corporate secrets, descended to the production floor where Frank was waiting with a knowing look and a cup of coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during the Bush administration. Still employed? Surprisingly. "Kid, let me tell you something about Catherine Morrison." Frank settled against a workbench, sipped his own coffee. "I knew her father for 30 years. George was a good man, but he made one big mistake, sent his daughter away to fancy schools, tried to give her opportunities he never had. Came back with degrees with polish, but without the calluses." He held up his own scarred hands. "These tell a story. They tell you someone's earned their place. Reese, she's got the brains, got the drive. But she's still learning that leadership isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about listening to the people who know what they're talking about." "You think she's learning?" Frank smiled, the expression creasing 1,000 wrinkles into deeper relief. "She asked you back, didn't she? George would have done the same thing. Made mistakes, owned them, fixed them. The man I knew wouldn't have let pride stand between him and doing what was right." He drained his coffee, crushed the cup. "Question is, you gonna help her, or you gonna let whatever chip you're carrying around keep you from seeing an opportunity?" The rest of the day passed in the usual rhythm of the production floor, steel screaming through cutters, welders, throwing sparks like angry stars, the baseline thunder of the hydraulic press running smooth and steady with its rebuilt valve seat. Brennan moved through it all on autopilot, his mind already drafting the conversation he'd have with Reese at 6 o'clock. At 5:15 he stopped by the house to grab the full proposal, 60 pages of detailed analysis, implementation phases, cost-benefit projections that he'd compiled over 6 months of careful observation. Harper met him at the door, backpack already on. "Are we working on my project now?" "Soon, sweetheart. I have to drop something off at work first." Her face fell with the particular devastation only a 7-year-old can achieve. "You promised. And I'm keeping that promise. 1 hour, maybe less. Then we'll work until bedtime if we have to." He crouched down, met her eyes. Sarah's eyes, dark and expressive. "Has your dad ever broken a promise to you?" She considered this with a child's careful honesty. "No. Not starting today. Louise appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Go on, Brennan. Harper and I will start measuring the filter components. Get the prep work done." The gratitude he felt was too large for words. He squeezed Louise's shoulder the closest he ever came to admitting how much he depended on her, and headed back out into the November evening with his proposal and a strange flutter of something that might have been hope. Morrison Steele's administrative building stood mostly empty after 5. Brennan rode the elevator, a loan proposal tucked under his arm, and found Reese's office door open, warm light spilling into the darkened hallway. She sat at her desk, blazer still off, hair starting to escape its professional arrangement, studying something on her computer with fierce concentration. She looked up as he knocked, and her expression shifted through several emotions before settling on something like relief. "You came. Said I would." He laid the proposal on her desk, and for the next 90 minutes they worked through it page by page. She asked sharp questions about implementation timelines, about training requirements, about how to sell preventive maintenance to a board that only understood reactive costs. He answered with the accumulated knowledge of 12 years on the production floor, translating mechanical reality into business language. Somewhere around page 40, Reese's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and guilt flashed across her face. "My sister Rachel, asking if I'm picking Finn up tonight or if Margaret should." "What time did you promise him?" 6:30. She checked her watch, 7:45. "I lost track of time." Brennan thought of Harper waiting at home with Louise measuring pipes and believing her father would be back soon. "Then you should go. We're not finished. We can finish tomorrow. Your kid's waiting." Something in her face crumbled and rebuilt in the span of a breath. How do you do it? Balance the job and the single-parent thing without constantly failing at one or both? I don't. The admission came easier than expected. I just try to fail at the job more than I fail at being a dad. Reese closed the proposal, stood, grabbed her blazer from the chair back. "Tomorrow then, same time. After I spend time with Harper." They walked to the elevator together, the building silent around them except for the distant hum of the production floor that never fully slept. As the elevator descended, Reese spoke into the comfortable quiet. "Thank you, Brennan, for this." She gestured with the proposal. "For giving me a chance to prove I can do better than I did 2 months ago." The elevator doors opened on the first floor. Outside, freezing rain had turned to wet snow, Pittsburgh winter announcing its arrival with typical subtlety. They stood in the lobby watching the weather through glass doors, and Brennan realized something had shifted. The CEO and the mechanic had found common ground in proposals and broken promises in children waiting at home and the impossible mathematics of doing enough. "My father used to say something." Reese's reflection in the glass door looked younger, more uncertain. "Title doesn't make the leader, character does." Brennan recognized the words from his conversation with Frank, wondered if the old foreman had been spreading wisdom in multiple directions. "Your father was right." "I hope so." She pulled her coat tighter. "Because I'm about to bet everything that a mechanic with character knows more about running this company than a CFO with an MBA. They stepped into the November night snow, already covering the parking lot in a thin white shroud. Reese walked to her Lexus, Brennan to his truck, and neither of them knew that the storm approaching would make tonight's weather look like a gentle blessing. The pilot program launched on a Tuesday morning with the kind of institutional resistance that could crush lesser initiatives. Brennan stood in the engineering department conference room facing 8 skeptical faces, 6 engineers with graduate degrees, 2 production supervisors who'd climbed through the ranks, all of them wondering why a mechanic was suddenly calling shots on operational procedure. Preventive maintenance sounds great in theory. Chad Winters, lead mechanical engineer, barely glanced up from his laptop. But you're talking about taking equipment offline during productive hours. The math doesn't work. Brennan had prepared for this. He pulled up a slide showing the Kellerman press failure, the cascade of costs, lost production time, emergency repairs, nearly losing a $2 million contract. The math works better than waiting for catastrophic failure. This press went down because we ignored warning signs for 3 months. Bearing noise, temperature fluctuations, pressure, inconsistencies, all documented in maintenance logs nobody read. Hindsight analysis. Chad leaned back, arms crossed. You can't predict every failure. No, but I can predict the ones that follow patterns. And patterns are what preventive maintenance catches. Brennan advanced to the next slide, his proposed schedule for production line 3, the test case Reese had approved. 2 hours of scheduled maintenance per week, rotating equipment, so we never take the whole line down. We monitor, we adjust, we catch problems before they cascade. The presentation lasted 40 minutes. Questions ranged from genuinely curious to deliberately hostile, and by the end Brennan felt like he'd defended a doctoral thesis to a committee that had already decided to fail him. Only Frank Russo's presence in the back corner, arms folded and expression approving, kept him from walking out. After the engineers filed out, Frank approached with 2 cups of vending machine coffee. That went better than I expected. They hated it. They hated that it came from you instead of one of them. Frank handed over the coffee, which somehow tasted worse than usual. Give it time. Results speak louder than degrees. Time proved Frank right. Within 3 weeks, Line 3's downtime dropped by 32%. Minor issues caught early, a worn belt here, a misaligned sensor there, prevented the kind of cascading failures that had plagued other production areas. The engineers stopped openly scoffing. Chad Winters actually asked Brennan's opinion on a bearing replacement schedule, though he phrased it like he was doing Brennan a favor. Reese tracked the results with the intensity of someone who'd bet her career on a mechanic's hunch. She appeared on the production floor more frequently, asking questions that revealed how much she'd been learning. She wore steel-toed boots now instead of heels, had traded expensive suits for practical slacks and company-branded polo shirts when inspecting equipment. The transformation fascinated the floor workers and horrified the executive suite in equal measure. Your CEO's turning into one of us. Tommy Rizzo grinned as they watched Reese examine a welding station, asking the operator detailed questions about torch angles and heat distribution. Martin Lancaster looks like he's swallowed a lemon every time he sees her in work boots. Brennan had also noticed how Martin's expressions had shifted from condescension to something harder, more calculating. The CFO attended production meetings, now always with a leather portfolio and an assistant taking notes, always watching Brennan with eyes that measured and cataloged. The real shift came on a Saturday in early December. Brennan had promised Harper they'd spend the afternoon working on her science fair project. The water filtration system was nearly complete, just needed final assembly and testing. He was measuring PVC lengths in the kitchen when his phone rang. Reese's number. I know it's the weekend. Her voice carried background noise traffic wind, the urban symphony of Pittsburgh streets. But Finn and I are stuck. Car died near the Strip District. AAA says 2 hours minimum. Brennan glanced at Harper, who was carefully arranging gravel layers in the filter column, her tongue poking out in concentration. Where exactly are you? 20 minutes later, he pulled up to find Reese and a small boy standing beside a dead Lexus SUV, both looking miserable in the December cold. Finn Morrison was a thin kid with his mother's dark hair and serious eyes, currently red from either cold or tears or both. He watched Brennan's truck approach with the wariness of a child who'd learned not to trust adult promises. This is embarrassing. Reese hugged herself against the wind. I should have just waited for the tow truck. Pop the hood. Brennan grabbed his toolbox from the truck bed, aware of Harper pressing her face against the back window, equally curious about the stranded boy. The problem revealed itself quickly. Corroded battery terminals, a connection loose enough to prevent starting but tight enough to fool a casual inspection. Brennan cleaned the corrosion with a wire brush, tightened the connections, and had the engine running in under 10 minutes. Finn's eyes widened. You fixed it that fast? Wasn't really broken, just needed attention. Brennan closed the hood, wiped his hands on a shop rag. Your battery's getting old, though. Might want to replace it before real winter hits. Reese's relief was palpable. Thank you. I don't know what let me pay you for your time. You already pay me. Brennan glanced at his truck where Harper had rolled down the window. But if you really want to say thanks, my daughter's been working on a science project for weeks. She could use someone to show it off to besides me and Louise. The invitation surprised him as much as it surprised Reese. But something about the way Finn was looking at Harper, curious, hopeful, desperate for something that looked like normal childhood interaction, made the words feel right. "We don't want to intrude on your Saturday." "Dad, is that lady your boss?" Harper called from the truck. Brennan nodded. "This is Mrs. Morrison and her son Finn." "Cool. Want to see my water filter? It's going to win the science fair." Harper's confidence was absolute endearing, and Brennan watched Finn's wariness crack under the assault of her enthusiasm. They ended up in Brennan's kitchen, both kids leaning over the filter system, while Harper explained activated charcoal and particle filtration with the authority of someone who'd absorbed every word her father had taught her. Finn listened with rapt attention, asking questions that revealed a quick mind hungry for engagement. Reese stood in the doorway, clearly uncomfortable in the modest surroundings, but unable to stop watching her son laugh at something Harper said. Brennan started coffee more to give his hands something to do than because either of them needed caffeine. "He doesn't usually open up like this." Reese accepted the mug, wrapped both hands around it. "At school, teachers say he's too quiet, doesn't make friends easily. Harper doesn't give people a choice about being friends." Brennan watched his daughter demonstrate the filter's operation. Dirty water going in one end, clean water emerging from the other, both kids cheering like she'd performed magic. She decided Louise was her grandmother 3 weeks after we moved in. Poor woman never had a chance. Louise. Our neighbor. Widow, no family nearby. She's watched Harper after school since my wife passed. Reese's expression shifted, softened. "I didn't know you were widowed. I'm sorry." 3 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light. The words came easier now than they had in the beginning, though the hole Sarah's absence left never fully closed. Harper was 4, young enough that some days I don't think she remembers what it was like to have 2 parents. They watched the children in silence for a moment. 2 single parents navigating the impossible alone, suddenly less alone in each other's understanding. Finn's father left when he was 4. Reese's voice went flat professional, the tone she probably used in depositions and board meetings. "Robert said he couldn't handle the pressure of being married to someone more successful than him, that I cared more about Morrison Steel than about family." She paused, studying her coffee like it held answers. Maybe he was right. "You're here now." Brennan gestured toward Finn, who was helping Harper test the filter with increasingly dirty water samples. "That counts." "Does it?" "I missed his show and tell on Thursday. Again, I've missed the last 4. Reese's jaw tightened. "My nanny Margaret knows his teachers better than I do. She's the one who goes to parent conferences, school events. I just sign the checks and tell myself providing for him is the same as being there for him." Brennan recognized the rationalization. Had made similar ones during his Boeing years when Sarah was still alive, and he'd worked 60-hour weeks chasing promotions that seemed important at the time. "My dad used to say something when I was a kid working in his garage. You can't give what you don't have." He meant time, attention, presence, the things money doesn't buy. But money buys stability, security, opportunities. Reese set down her coffee, crossed her arms. "If I step back from Morrison Steel, if I let work slide to spend more time with Finn, 200 families lose their jobs. How do I choose my son over their children?" "Who says you have to choose?" The question hung between them, challenging. "That's what the maintenance program's about. Efficiency, getting better results in less time by working smarter. Maybe the same principle applies to more than just machines." Harper appeared at Brennan's elbow, tugging his shirt. "Dad, can Finn stay for dinner? Please. We want to build a second filter together." 2 pairs of eyes, one 7-year-old hopeful. One 7-year-old cautiously optimistic stared up at the adults. Brennan looked at Reese, who was clearly calculating dinner plans, nanny schedules, the optics of her CEO self having dinner at an employee's house. "We're just having spaghetti, nothing fancy." "Can we, Mom?" Finn's voice was small but urgent. "Please." Reese looked at her son, at the first genuine excitement she'd seen in his face in months, and something in her calculation shifted. If it's really not too much trouble. Dinner was chaos in the best way. Harper commandeered Finn as sous chef, both kids arguing good-naturedly about the proper sauce-to-pasta ratio. Louise appeared uninvited with garlic bread and homemade cookies, took one look at Reese Morrison sitting at Brennan's kitchen table, and raised an eyebrow so eloquently that Brennan felt his neck heat. Louise Crawford. She extended a hand to Reese, the unofficial grandmother next door. Catherine Morrison. Reese. The correction came naturally. Thank you for the bread. You didn't have to. Honey, I've been feeding this household for 3 years. One more mouth is barely noticeable. Louise settled into a chair like she owned the place, which in some ways she did. Harper tells me you run the steel company. Must be interesting work. Most days it feels like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. Louise laughed, sharp and genuine. I was married to a steel worker for 42 years. My Tom used to say the same thing about management: good intentions, wrong tools. She caught Brennan's eye. Though I'm guessing you're working on getting better tools. The conversation flowed easier after that. Louise had a gift for drawing people out, for making CEO and mechanic and 2 7-year-olds feel like they were all equally important parts of the same conversation. By the time they sat down to eat, Reese had relaxed enough to laugh at Harper's story about the time Brennan had accidentally glued his hand to a wrench. He had to go to work wearing the wrench like a really weird bracelet. Harper demonstrated miming confusion. Everyone thought it was a new tool or something. It was super glue. Brennan defended himself to general laughter. And I got it off eventually. After 3 days, Louise stage whispered to Reese. The man's brilliant with machines but cannot read warning labels to save his life. Finn giggled, actually giggled, and Reese's expression did something complicated. Joy and grief tangled together, the sound of her son's unguarded happiness revealing how rare such moments had become. After dinner, the kids returned to the filter project while the adults cleaned up. Louise excused herself with obvious calculation, leaving Brennan and Reese alone with soapy water and comfortable silence. Thank you for this. Reese dried a plate with mechanical precision. I can't remember the last time Finn looked this happy. Harper either. She's been asking about friends her age since we moved here. Brennan handed her another plate. Louise is great, but she's not exactly playground material. I heard that. Louise called from the living room where she'd settled with a magazine. Reese smiled. Actually smiled, and the expression transformed her face from boardroom ice to something warm and accessible. Could they do this again? Not the emergency rescue part? Just maybe Harper could come over sometime, or Finn could come here. Like a play date. I've never actually arranged one. The admission came with embarrassment. Margaret usually handles Finn's social calendar, which sounds terrible when I say it out loud. Next Saturday. Brennan made the offer before overthinking it. There's a maker fair at the Science Museum. Harper's been begging to go. Might be fun for both kids. The Science Museum. Reese repeated it like testing foreign words. Yes, that sounds yes, I'd like that. They exchanged numbers, made tentative plans, and when Reese finally gathered Finn to leave, the boy hugged Harper goodbye with the fierce intensity of someone who'd found something precious and didn't want to let go. Harper extracted a promise that they'd build filters together again soon, and Finn nodded seriously, sealing the pact with a 7-year-old's absolute commitment. After they left, Louise cornered Brennan in the kitchen. That woman's falling for you. She's my boss. She's a person, a lonely person who just spent 3 hours in your kitchen looking more relaxed than she probably has in years. Louise poked him in the chest. And you're falling for her too, whether you want to admit it or not. I'm not, she's Harper's friend's mom. Keep telling yourself that, honey. Louise headed for the door, paused. But remember something. Sarah would want you to be happy. She'd want Harper to have more than just you and me in her corner. Sometimes the universe gives us second chances. Question is whether we're brave enough to take them. The Science Museum trip happened the following Saturday, and it set a pattern that repeated through December and into January. Sometimes it was museums, sometimes the library, once a bowling alley where both kids demonstrated spectacular incompetence but laughed so hard they could barely stand. The adults hovered on the periphery, gradually moving closer as the weeks passed. At work, the preventive maintenance program expanded to 2 more production lines. Downtime across the facility dropped by 28%. Emergency repairs fell by 43%. The numbers spoke loudly enough that even Chad Winters stopped making snide comments about mechanics playing engineer. Then came the promotion offer. Reese called Brennan into her office on a Tuesday afternoon in mid-January. Snow fell past the windows in lazy spirals, and Pittsburgh looked clean and new under its white coating. She stood at the window watching the weather and didn't turn when he entered. "I'm creating a new position, Director of Operations Excellence. It would oversee preventive maintenance process improvement workforce development. Report directly to me." Brennan absorbed this, recognizing the opportunity and the complication in equal measure. "That's an executive position." "Yes, I'm a mechanic." "You're a systems thinker who understands this company better than most of the people with offices on this floor." Reese finally turned, and her expression was vulnerable in ways she never allowed in board meetings. "I need someone I can trust in that role. Someone who cares about Morrison Steel as a company, not just as a line on their resume. The board will question it. Martin will use it against you." "Let him." Her voice carried steel. "I'm tired of making decisions based on what Martin thinks. My father used to say something title doesn't make the leader, character does. You have character, Brennan. That's worth more than an MBA." The offer sat between them heavy with implications. Taking it would mean longer hours at least initially. Would mean stepping fully into Reese's world of spreadsheets and strategy sessions. Would mean changing the careful balance he'd built around Harper's needs. "I have to think about it." "Of course." Reese returned to her desk, pulled out a formal offer letter. "Take a week. Talk to Harper. Talk to Louise. Make sure it's right for your family." That evening, Harper listened to his explanation of the job offer with the serious consideration she brought to all important matters. They sat at the kitchen table, her filter project finally complete, and awaiting the science fair next Friday. "Would you have to work more?" "At first, probably. But the whole point of the job is to make things run smoother. Eventually, it should mean more time, not less." Harper chewed her lip, a gesture so perfectly Sarah that Brennan's chest ached. "Would you still come to my science fair?" "Nothing on earth could keep me away." "Then you should do it." She returned to her homework with the matter settled. "Mom always said you were too smart to be just fixing things. You should be teaching people how not to break them." The wisdom landed with surprising force. Sarah had said exactly that back when Boeing was courting him, when he'd been torn between the prestige of aircraft engineering and the hands-on satisfaction of mechanical work. She'd always seen him more clearly than he saw himself. He accepted the position the next morning. The announcement went out company-wide by afternoon, and by evening, the first cracks in Morrison Steel's fragile peace began to show. Martin Lancaster requested a private meeting with Brennan 2 days later. His office sat directly below Reese's, decorated in dark wood and leather designed to intimidate. Martin sat behind his desk like a judge preparing to deliver sentence. "Congratulations on your promotion." The words carried no warmth. Quite a rise for someone who was changing oil filters 6 months ago. "I appreciate the vote of confidence." "Did I offer confidence?" Martin leaned back, steepled his fingers. "I'm curious, Mr. Sullivan, how exactly did you convince our CEO that a mechanic deserves an executive position? What special skills do you bring to the table?" The implication hung in the air between them, ugly and deliberate. Brennan kept his expression neutral through sheer force of will. The ability to see problems before they become catastrophic. The respect of the workforce. Results that speak louder than assumptions. Results. Martin pulled a folder from his desk, slid it across. "I've been tracking your preventive maintenance program. Very impressive numbers. Almost too impressive. Makes me wonder if perhaps the data's been massaged to support a predetermined conclusion." Brennan opened the folder, found his own reports annotated with red ink, with questions marks and margin notes suggesting irregularities that didn't exist. "This data comes straight from production logs. Time-stamped, supervisor-verified, cross-referenced with inventory systems. Data can be manipulated, especially when the person analyzing it has a vested interest in positive results." Martin reclaimed the folder. And when that person has developed a close personal relationship with the CEO, well, it raises questions about objectivity. The threat crystallized. Martin knew about the museum trips, the dinners, the growing connection between two single parents and their children. Knew and was weaponizing it. My relationship with Mrs. Morrison is professional. Is it? Martin smiled without humor. I've heard about weekend outings, children becoming friends, very cozy, very convenient for a mechanic with ambition. Brennan stood, recognizing the meeting for what it was: intimidation disguised as concern. If you have questions about my work, bring them to me directly. If you have concerns about Mrs. Morrison's judgment, take them to the board. But don't sit here making insinuations about things you know nothing about. Oh, I know plenty, Mr. Sullivan. Martin's voice went cold. I've served this company for 20 years, watched George Morrison build it into something remarkable, and I've watched his daughter stumble from one poor decision to another, driven by emotion instead of logic. Promoting you is just the latest example. When it blows up in her face, and it will, the board will remember who warned them. Brennan left before he said something that would get him fired, but Martin's words followed him down the hallway, into the elevator, out to the production floor, where Frank took one look at his face and handed him a wrench. Work it out on something mechanical, less chance of assault charges. By the time Brennan picked up Harper that evening, he'd disassembled and reassembled a gearbox that didn't need service, just to have an outlet for the fury Martin had ignited. Harper climbed into the truck, chattering about her science fair preparation, oblivious to her father's tension, until they were halfway home. Are you mad about something? Just work stuff, sweetheart. Nothing for you to worry about. Is it about your new job? Her perceptiveness never stopped surprising him. Are people being mean because you got promoted? How to explain office politics to a 7-year-old? How to translate Martin's calculated cruelty into terms that wouldn't frighten her? Some people think I don't deserve the new position, that I only got it because the boss likes me. Harper considered this. But you're really good at your job. Everyone says so. Frank says you're the best mechanic he's ever seen. Being good at one job doesn't automatically make you good at another one. But you haven't even started the new job yet. She frowned, following the logic. How can they know you won't be good at it if you haven't tried? Children and their inconvenient clarity. Brennan pulled into their driveway, killed the engine. You're right. They can't know. They're just afraid of change. That's dumb. Harper unbuckled her seatbelt. Mom used to say being afraid of change is how you stay stuck. You're not stuck, Dad. You're moving forward. The observation hit harder than Martin's threats. Sarah had pushed him constantly toward growth, toward challenges that scared him, toward the uncomfortable edges where real development happened. Accepting this promotion, accepting whatever complications came with it, that was moving forward. Letting Martin's intimidation work was staying stuck. That weekend, the science fair arrived with all the chaos of elementary school events everywhere. Harper's filter sat proudly on its display table, complete with hand-drawn diagrams and a typed explanation that Brennan had helped her edit 6 times. She wore her best dress and an expression of fierce determination. Reese appeared halfway through the judging period, Finn in tow, both looking slightly overwhelmed by the gymnasium packed with children and projects and anxious parents. She found Brennan near the refreshment table, poured herself weak coffee from an industrial dispenser. I made it. She sounded surprised by her own success. I actually cleared my calendar and made it. Harper will be thrilled. Brennan watched his daughter explaining her filter to a judge, using technical terms with confidence. She's been asking if you were coming. Where is O? Reese spotted Finn, who'd gravitated to Harper's table without prompting. The two kids stood together while Harper demonstrated the filtration process. Finn nodding along like they'd rehearsed this presentation together. They watched the children in comfortable silence, two parents who'd somehow found themselves orbiting each other's lives, gravity pulling them closer, despite the professional complications. Martin knows about the museum trips. Brennan kept his voice low. He called me into his office, made implications about our relationship affecting your judgment. Reese's expression went carefully blank. What kind of implications? The kind meant to suggest I'm using you to advance my career. that you're letting personal feelings compromise professional decisions. Color rose in her cheeks. Anger or embarrassment or both. He has no right. He's positioning himself, building a narrative for the board. Brennan watched Harper win third place, her face glowing with pride. Question is, what do we do about it? Reese was quiet for a long moment, studying her son, who was clapping enthusiastically for Harper's success. I don't want to stop this. The kids, I mean. They're good for each other. Finn's happier than I've seen him since Robert left. Harper, too. But Martin will use it. Twist it into something inappropriate. Her jaw set. He's trying to force me to choose between doing what's right for the company and what's right for my son. Between your promotion and our friendship. Maybe we do need to step back. The words hurt to say. Until after the board reviews the maintenance program results. Give Martin less ammunition. No. The response was immediate, fierce. I've spent 3 years letting fear dictate my decisions. Fear of failing my father's legacy. Fear of proving Robert right about my priorities. Fear of the board's judgment. I'm done being afraid. She turned to face him fully, and her eyes carried something that looked like hope wrapped in determination. The maintenance program works. Your promotion is justified. Our children being friends is normal and healthy, and none of Martin Lancaster's business. If he wants to make an issue of it, let him. I'll fight him on facts and results, not by hiding or backing down. Brennan felt something shift in his chest, recognizing the courage it took for her to draw that line. You're sure? I'm terrified. She smiled without humor. But being terrified and doing it anyway, that's what my father would have called character. Harper ran over bronze medal bouncing on her chest, Finn trailing behind. Dad, did you see third place in Mr. Henderson said my filtration rate was higher than any other project. I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. Can Finn come celebrate, please? We want to go to the ice cream place. Both kids looked up with identical hopeful expressions, and Brennan glanced at Reese, who nodded. Ice cream sounds perfect. They piled into Brennan's truck, Harper and Finn in back. Reese in the passenger seat, looking slightly uncomfortable in the older vehicle, but game to pretend this was normal. The ice cream shop was crowded with other science fair families, sugar and celebration filling the air with tangible joy. Somewhere between Harper's chocolate explosion sundae and Finn's more modest vanilla cone, Reese's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and her expression went carefully neutral. I need to take this. It's my sister Rachel. She stepped outside, and through the window Brennan watched her pace, watched her expression cycle through concern and frustration. When she returned, something had shifted. Rachel's flight got delayed. She was supposed to watch Finn tonight while I attend a board dinner. Reese looked at her son, clearly calculating. I'll have to cancel. We can watch him. The offer came from Harper, who'd been eavesdropping with the shamelessness of childhood. Right, Dad, Finn can come to our house. We'll build another filter. Finn's eyes went wide with hope. Reese looked torn between logistics and desire. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. We're offering. Brennan kept his voice casual, giving her the out if she needed it. Harper's right. They can work on a project. I'll feed them something that passes for dinner. You can pick him up after your meeting. Reese's throat worked. Are you sure? Positive. That evening unfolded with the chaotic ease that characterized Harper's approach to everything. She and Finn built not one but 3 filter prototypes, argued cheerfully about gravel sizes, and covered Brennan's kitchen table in a layer of activated charcoal dust that would probably never fully clean. Louise appeared with cookies and knowing looks, stayed long enough to ensure Brennan wasn't drowning in childcare, then vanished back to her own house. At 8 o'clock, Brennan's phone lit up with a text from Reese running late. Board dinner turning into strategy session. We'll explain later. At 9, both kids had fallen asleep on the couch, filter components scattered around them like battle debris. Brennan covered them with a blanket, settled into the recliner with a book he didn't read, and waited. Reese arrived at 9:45, still in her business attire, looking exhausted and wired simultaneously. She stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene, 2 children asleep together, filter parts everywhere, Brennan in his recliner with Louise's Afghan over his legs. I'm so sorry. The dinner ran longer than... Don't apologize. Brennan stood careful not to wake the kids. They had fun. Finn's a good kid. Smart, curious kind. You're doing something right. She moved closer, knelt beside the couch, brushed hair from Finn's forehead with a gesture so tender it made Brennan's chest ache. Thank you for this. For giving him a normal evening, a friend who just wants to build things and laugh. For giving him what I seem incapable of providing. You're providing plenty. Love, stability, opportunity. Brennan kept his voice low. Don't measure yourself against an impossible standard. Reese looked up at him, and in the dim light from the kitchen, her expression held vulnerability he'd never seen in the boardroom. The board meeting. Martin presented his sale proposal again. $800 million from Titan Industries. Several board members are seriously considering it. The news landed like a gut punch. What happens now? I fight, with every tool I have. She stood, straightened her jacket like armor. Your maintenance program results go to the board next week. If I can prove the company's trajectory is upward, not downward, it undercuts Martin's entire argument about necessary sales. No pressure then. Brennan, I need you to know if this goes badly, if Martin wins, I'll make sure you land on your feet. References, severance, whatever you need. I'm not worried about landing. He met her eyes. I'm worried about you, about what happens if Morrison Steel isn't Morrison anymore. Something passed between them in the quiet house, something that had been building since the first weekend together, since ice cream and science fairs and children's laughter. Reese stepped closer, close enough that Brennan could smell her perfume, could see the exhaustion in the fine lines around her eyes. I should go. Get Finn home. Yeah. Neither of them moved. The moment stretched, pulled taut with possibility and hesitation, and the awareness that crossing certain lines changed everything. Finally, Reese stepped back, the spell breaking. Thank you for everything. For being... She struggled with the words. For being someone I can trust. That's rarer than you'd think. She gathered Finn, who barely woke, and Brennan walked them to her car. After they drove away, he stood in his driveway watching taillights disappear into the February night and wondered what he'd gotten himself into. Louise appeared on her porch wrapped in her purple fleece. You're in deep, honey. I know. Question is, you gonna swim or drown? Brennan looked at his modest house, at the workshop garage where Sarah's memory lived, in every tool, at the life he'd carefully constructed around grief and duty and Harper's needs. Then he thought about Reese's vulnerable expression, about Finn's laughter, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, the universe was offering that second chance Louise had mentioned. Guess we'll find out. The board meeting convened on a Tuesday morning in late February, the kind of Pittsburgh winter day when the sky hung low and gray, threatening snow that wouldn't fall. Brennan sat in the hallway outside the boardroom, his presentation loaded on a laptop, his suit borrowed from Frank's son and slightly too tight in the shoulders. Through the heavy oak doors he could hear muffled voices, the occasional sharp word cutting through like a knife. Reese had been in there for 40 minutes already, defending her refusal to sell. Martin had been in there longer, building his case with the patience of someone who'd been planning this moment for months. The door opened. Margaret Hayes appeared, her professional mask firmly in place. They're ready for you, Mr. Sullivan. The boardroom felt designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, portraits of Morrison patriarchs glaring from the walls, a table so polished Brennan could see his reflection in the wood. 8 board members sat in judgment, Douglas Hendricks at the head, Martin Lancaster to his right, Reese isolated at the far end, like a defendant awaiting verdict. Brennan set up his laptop connected to the projector and tried not to think about the fact that 200 jobs rode on the next 30 minutes. Gentlemen, Mrs. Morrison. He pulled up the first slide, 6 months of data distilled into graphs and metrics. You asked for proof that preventive maintenance could transform Morrison Steel's operational efficiency. Here it is. The presentation walked through every metric Martin had questioned. Downtime reduction, 34% across all implemented lines. Emergency repair costs down 41%. Production consistency up 28%. employee satisfaction surveys showing improved morale, reduced turnover, workers who felt heard and valued instead of disposable. These are impressive numbers. Douglas Hendricks studied the graphs with the careful attention of someone who'd built his own fortune in manufacturing. But Mr. Lancaster has raised concerns about sustainability. Can you maintain these results long-term, or are we looking at short-term gains? The foundation is sustainable because it's based on listening to the people who actually do the work. Brennan advanced to a slide showing testimony from floor workers, supervisors, shift foremen. For years, maintenance crews have been reporting warning signs that got ignored. Bearing noise, temperature fluctuations, pressure inconsistencies. All documented, all dismissed as non-critical. We didn't invent new technology. We just started paying attention to the people who knew what they were talking about. Martin leaned forward, expression carefully sympathetic. Mr. Sullivan, no one questions your mechanical expertise, but operational strategy requires understanding market forces, competitive positioning, financial sustainability. These are concerns beyond the production floor. The dismissal was expertly delivered, painting Brennan as a well-meaning mechanic out of his depth. Several board members nodded and Brennan felt the room slipping away. You're right. He closed his laptop, decided to abandon the script. I don't have an MBA. I can't quote market theories or financial models. What I have is 12 years of watching this company bleed talent because people felt disposable. Watching machines fail because we prioritized quarterly earnings over long-term stability. Watching workers show up every day knowing their experience and knowledge meant nothing to the people making decisions. He turned to Martin. You want to sell Morrison Steel to Titan Industries for $800 million. Call it a smart financial move. But financial moves don't account for the guy who's worked here 30 years, who's put 3 kids through college on Morrison wages, who'll get a severance check and a handshake while his job gets shipped to a non-union facility in Tennessee. They don't account for the community that built itself around this company, the tax base that funds schools and hospitals, the identity of workers who take pride in what they build. Douglas Hendricks studied him with new interest. You're asking us to choose sentiment over fiduciary responsibility. I'm asking you to recognize that fiduciary responsibility includes preserving value, not just extracting it. Brennan gestured at the data on screen. These numbers prove Morrison Steel can thrive. We're more efficient now than we've been in 5 years. Orders are up, quality is up, costs are down. The company isn't dying, it was being starved. And the question you have to ask is why? Martin's expression went cold. That's a serious accusation. It's a serious question. Brennan pulled out a folder Frank had given him that morning, pages of maintenance budgets going back 3 years. These are budget allocations for preventive maintenance. 3 years ago, under George Morrison, we had 12 full-time maintenance engineers and a quarterly budget of $400,000. Last year, under Mr. Lancaster's financial oversight, we had 6 engineers and a budget of $200,000. He distributed copies around the table. Cut maintenance by half, equipment fails twice as often. Blame the failures on aging infrastructure and declining efficiency. Use the declining efficiency to justify selling the company. It's a perfect strategy if your goal is liquidation instead of sustainability. The room erupted. Martin stood, face flushed. That's slander. Those cuts were necessary cost-saving measures approved by this board. Approved based on your recommendations. Douglas flipped through the budget documents, his expression darkening. Martin, you presented these as operational optimization. You never mentioned we were gutting preventive maintenance. Because preventive maintenance is an expense, not a revenue generator. Martin fought to control his voice. I've served this company for 20 years. I knew George Morrison when Catherine was still in grade school. Everything I've done has been in Morrison Steel's best interest. Whose definition of best interest? Reese spoke for the first time, her voice carrying quiet steel. My father left journals, Martin. I've been reading them. He wrote about you 6 months before he died. Wrote that you'd been pressuring him to retire early to let you modernize the company. He said no because he knew modernize was code for strip and sell. She pulled out a leather-bound journal open to a marked page. I'll read you what he wrote. Martin came to me again today with Titan's preliminary offer. He doesn't understand that Morrison Steel isn't about profit margins, it's about legacy, about the workers, about community. I'm worried that when I'm gone, he'll dismantle everything I built. I need to make sure Catherine understands what this company really represents." Martin's face went from flushed to pale. George was old sick. He wasn't thinking clearly toward the end. He was clear enough to document your meetings, your pressure tactics, your vision for the company. Reese stood, and every inch of her radiated controlled fury. "You've been positioning for this sale since before my father died, and when I took over you saw an opportunity, an inexperienced CEO, you could manipulate financial crises, you could manufacture a board, you could convince that selling was the only option." "This is conspiracy theory nonsense," Martin appealed to Douglas. "She's letting emotion cloud her judgment, just like I warned. Her relationship with Sullivan has clearly compromised her objectivity." "My relationship with Brennan is professional respect based on results." Reese's voice could have cut diamonds. "But you're right about one thing, I am emotional. I'm angry that you spent 20 years earning my father's trust just to betray everything he stood for. I'm furious that you've been systematically sabotaging this company to justify selling it. And I'm determined to make sure you don't succeed." Douglas held up a hand, silencing Martin's protest. "We'll take a 30-minute recess. Board members only in the conference room. Catherine, Martin, Mr. Sullivan, please wait." The next 30 minutes felt like hours. Brennan paced the hallway while Reese made phone calls in her office. Martin sat rigid in a leather chair staring at nothing, his carefully constructed narrative collapsing around him. When the board reconvened, Douglas Hendricks looked every one of his 75 years. "The board has reviewed the evidence presented. Martin, your financial management has been exemplary in many ways, but the patterns Mr. Sullivan identified are troubling. Combined with George's concerns documented in his journals, we have questions about whether operational decisions were made in the company's best interest or in service of a predetermined outcome." Martin's jaw worked. "You're taking the word of a mechanic and a grief-stricken daughter over 20 years of loyal service." "We're taking the word of documented evidence and measurable results." Douglas's voice carried finality. "The board votes 6-2 to retain Morrison Steel as an independent company. We're declining Titan's offer. Additionally, we're recommending a transition. Martin, you'll be offered a consulting position with our international partners. Not a termination, but a lateral move that removes you from operational decision-making." "You're exiling me." Martin stood gathering his materials with shaking hands. "Replacing 20 years of experience with a CEO who's been in the job less than 4 and a mechanic playing executive. This company will fail within 2 years. Then we'll fail on our own terms." Reese met his glare without flinching. "Building something worthwhile instead of cashing out. That's what my father would have chosen." Martin left without another word, and Brennan felt something uncoil in his chest. They'd won. Morrison Steel would survive, would transform, would prove that workers and communities mattered as much as profit margins. Douglas approached Reese after the other board members filed out. "Your father would be proud, Catherine, not just for fighting for winning with integrity. That takes more courage than most people have." She nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Alone in her office afterward, Reese leaned against the window, forehead pressed to the cold glass. Brennan stood uncertain in the doorway, unsure whether she needed space or company. "We did it." Her voice was hollow, exhausted. "Saved the company, removed. Martin validated everything we've been working toward, so why do I feel like I'm about to fall apart? Because you've been holding yourself together through pure force of will for months." Brennan moved closer. "You're allowed to feel it now." She turned, and her professional mask finally completely cracked. Tears streaked down her face. Her shoulders shook, and Brennan did the only thing that made sense. Pulled her into his arms and let her collapse against his chest. She cried like someone who'd been denying herself permission, great racking sobs that spoke of pressure and grief and terror finally released. "I was so scared." Her voice came muffled against his shoulder. "Scared of failing my father, failing the workers, proving Robert right about me being too focused on work to maintain relationships. scared that choosing the company meant losing Finn, and choosing Finn meant losing the company. You didn't have to choose. Brennan held her one hand, rubbing slow circles on her back. That's what today proved. You can be a good CEO and a good mother. The two don't cancel each other out. She pulled back enough to look at him. Mascara-smudged eyes read more beautiful in her vulnerability than she'd ever been in her boardroom armor. How did you do it? After Sarah died, how did you balance everything? Badly most days. Honesty seemed important in this moment. I made mistakes, missed things, felt like I was failing at both single parenting and work. But Harper and I, we figured out that being present matters more than being perfect. Some nights dinner was cereal. Some mornings I dropped her at school late. But we showed up for each other. That's what counts. Reese's laugh was watery. Finn and I had cereal for dinner twice this week. I felt like the worst mother on earth. Harper considers cereal a food group. You're doing fine. The moment stretched between them, charged with something that had been building for months. Reese's hand came up to rest against Brennan's chest, and he was acutely aware of how little space separated them, how easy it would be to close that gap entirely. I should go home. She didn't move. Finn's with Margaret. I promised I'd be back by 6. It's 4:30. You have time. Brennan, if I don't leave now. She stopped the unfinished sentence, hanging heavy with implication. He understood what she was offering and what she was protecting against. Moving too fast, risking too much, crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. Then go. Be with your son. Celebrate the win. We'll figure out the rest later. She nodded, stepped back, and the absence of her warmth felt like loss. Later. Yes. Later we should talk. About what this means. About where we go from here. Whenever you're ready. After she left, Brennan returned to the production floor where Frank was waiting with questions written across his weathered face. Board kept Morrison independent. Martin's out. Frank's grin split his face wide. Hot damn. We actually pulled it off. We pulled it off, Brennan corrected. Everyone who refused to accept that good enough was good enough, who kept showing up and speaking up and pushing for better. That's what saved this company. The news spread through Morrison Steel like wildfire. By shift change, everyone knew the company wasn't being sold, knew that their jobs were secure, knew that the preventive maintenance program that had started as a mechanic's hunch would now expand company-wide. The relief was palpable, infectious, and Brennan found himself shaking hands and accepting thanks from workers who'd never spoken to him before. He picked up Harper at 6:15, found her in Louise's kitchen helping frost sugar cookies shaped like hearts. Valentine's Day was approaching, and Harper had opinions about proper frosting to sprinkle ratios. Did you have a good day, Dad? Really good day, sweetheart. We saved a lot of jobs today. Cool. She returned to her cookie decorating with 7-year-old focus. Can Finn come over this weekend? We want to build a compost bin for his mom's garden. The casual mention of Finn of weekend plans that now felt normal and expected reminded Brennan how thoroughly their lives had become entangled. Harper and Finn were best friends. He and Reese were what colleagues who'd become something more complicated, something that scared him as much as it drew him forward. That weekend, the compost bin project turned into a full Saturday affair. Finn arrived mid-morning, Reese in tow, looking more relaxed than Brennan had ever seen her. She wore jeans and an old Carnegie Mellon sweatshirt, her hair in a simple ponytail. No makeup, no armor. Fair warning, I know nothing about composting, or gardening, or anything that grows in dirt. Lucky for you, Harper's done extensive research. Brennan gestured at his daughter, who was already lecturing Finn about carbon-to-nitrogen ratios with the authority of someone who'd watched 12 YouTube videos. They built the bin in Brennan's backyard, adults handling power tools while kids supervised and offered conflicting advice. Louise appeared with lemonade and commentary, stayed long enough to ensure no one was losing fingers, then retreated with obvious satisfaction. She's not subtle. Reese watched Louise's departure. Never has been. Brennan measured a board, marked his cut line. But she's also never wrong about people. What does she say about us? The question hung between them while the kids argued about corner joints. Brennan set down his pencil, met her eyes. That we're both too scared to admit we want something that feels impossible, and that fear isn't a good reason to walk away from happiness. Reese was quiet for a moment, watching Finn laugh at something Harper demonstrated. After Robert left, I promised myself I wouldn't risk relationships again. Wouldn't put Finn through the chaos of me dating someone, getting attached, having it fall apart. Easier to just focus on work, on being enough on my own. How's that working out? It was working fine until you opened your door during a storm and complicated everything. Her smile held no bitterness. You and Harper, you're like a window into a different way of living. Messy and imperfect and somehow more real than anything I've built. Real doesn't always mean better. Brennan picked up his saw, made the cut with practiced precision. My life is cereal for dinner and borrowed suits for board meetings, late-night science projects, and hoping Harper doesn't notice I'm making things up as I go. If you're looking for stability, I have stability. I have schedules and nannies and controlled chaos that looks good from outside. She took the cutboard from him, fitted it against the frame. What I don't have is joy. Finn doesn't have joy. And then we started spending weekends here, and suddenly we're laughing over ice cream and building filters, and I remember what it feels like to want something besides professional success. The compost bin took shape between them, physical work making emotional honesty easier. By late afternoon they had a functional structure and 2 kids covered in sawdust, debating where to position it in Reese's garden. Your yard or mine? Harper looked between the adults. Mine. Reese decided. That way Finn can check on it during the week and we can bring compost contributions when we visit on weekends. The casual assumption that weekend visits would continue, that this arrangement had permanence, made Brennan's chest tighten with something that felt dangerously like hope. They loaded the bin into Brennan's truck, drove in convoy to Reese's house, a stunning contemporary in Fox Chapel, with floor-to-ceiling windows and professionally landscaped grounds that screamed money in a way that made Brennan acutely aware of the class divide between them. Harper, oblivious to social dynamics, immediately claimed the perfect spot for the compost bin and directed placement with the authority of a foreman. Finn ran inside to grab garden gloves, leaving the adults alone in the perfectly manicured yard. This feels surreal. Brennan looked at the house, at the grounds, at the life Reese had built that was so different from his own. You showing me your garden, making plans for weekend composting, like we're building something together. She finished his thought. Because we are. I don't know what to call it yet, but whatever it is, I don't want to stop. Before Brennan could respond, a car pulled into the circular driveway. A man emerged, late 30s, expensive suit lawyer confidence radiating from every pore. Robert Whitmore, from the possessive way he approached Reese and the instant tension in her shoulders. Catherine, I tried calling. Robert. Her voice went cold, professional. What are you doing here? Finn's spring break is coming up. I want him to visit me in Boston. 2 weeks quality father-son time. Robert's eyes flicked to Brennan, dismissed him as irrelevant. Unless you've already made plans that take priority over his relationship with his father. The man who sees him twice a year doesn't get to lecture me about priorities. Reese crossed her arms. And Finn's old enough to decide if he wants to visit. You can't just show up demanding, I'm his father, I have rights. Finn appeared from the house, froze at the sight of Robert. Whatever enthusiasm had animated him moments ago drained away, replaced by careful neutrality. Hey, buddy. Robert's voice shifted, became forced casual. I was just telling your mom about our plans for spring break. You and me, Boston. We can catch a Red Sox game, visit the aquarium. Sound good? Finn glanced at his mother, at Brennan, at Harper, hovering uncertainly nearby. I don't want to go to Boston. Robert's smile tightened. Come on, Finn. We'll have fun. Just the guys. I said I don't want to. Finn's voice rose, panic edging into the words. You left. You don't get to come back and pretend we're a family. Finn, that's not fair. You told Mom she cared more about work than about us. But you're the one who left. You're the one who doesn't call, who forgets my birthday, who promises to visit and then doesn't show up. Tears streaked down Finn's face. I don't want to go to Boston. I want to stay here with Mom and Harper and Brennan. They're my family now. The declaration hit like a physical blow. Brennan felt it in his chest, saw it in Reese's expression, surprise and gratitude and terror tangled together. Harper moved closer to Finn, took his hand in silent solidarity. Robert's face cycled through shock, anger, and finally something like grief. "Catherine, we need to talk. Alone." "There's nothing to discuss." Reese's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Finn's old enough to make his preference clear. If you want a relationship with him, you need to earn it. Show up consistently. Keep promises. Prove you're invested in being a father, not just claiming parental rights when it's convenient." "And him," Robert gestured at Brennan. "Is he part of this earning it? Because from where I stand, you've replaced me pretty quickly." "Brennan has been more of a father to Finn in 4 months than you've been in 3 years. The words came fierce and uncompromising. "He shows up. He keeps his promises. He treats my son like he matters. Those are foreign concepts to you, I know, but maybe you should learn them." Robert looked like he wanted to argue, to fight, to reclaim some authority he'd long ago forfeited. But faced with Finn's tears and Reese's fury and his own failures, he retreated. "We'll discuss this through lawyers." "Discuss whatever you want, but Finn's wishes stand." They watched him drive away, the Tesla disappearing down the tree-lined street. Finn collapsed against his mother, crying with the abandon of a child who'd held too much inside for too long. Reese held him, murmuring reassurances, and Brennan herded Harper inside to give them privacy. The house's interior matched its exterior, modern, expensive, somehow sterile, despite the expensive furniture and carefully curated art. Harper gravitated to the windows, staring out at the view of Pittsburgh's skyline in the distance. "Is Finn okay?" "He will be. His dad showing up like that was hard for him." "My mom's dead." Harper's voice was matter-of-fact, the grief processed through years of therapy and Brennan's careful parenting. "Finn's dad is alive and just doesn't want to be a dad. I think that's harder." The observation, delivered with childhood clarity, stabbed something in Brennan's chest. "You might be right, sweetheart. Are you going to be Finn's dad now?" That's not..." Brennan struggled with how to answer. "Finn has a dad, even if that dad isn't doing a good job right now. But I can be his friend, someone who cares about him and shows up for him. Like you do for me. Exactly like I do for you." Harper nodded, satisfied with the answer, and went exploring. Brennan found Reese in the kitchen 20 minutes later, staring at nothing, Finn asleep on the couch in the adjacent room. He cried himself out. She looked exhausted, wrung dry. Didn't even make it to his bedroom. "Robert's an idiot. Robert's a lot of things, but he's also Finn's father, and I can't just erase that no matter how much I want to." She leaned against the counter. "What Finn said about you being his family that wasn't fair to you? You didn't sign up for..." "Stop." Brennan crossed the kitchen, stood close enough to feel her exhaustion radiating like heat. "Don't apologize for your son finding someone safe to trust. Don't minimize what we've all been building these past months." "What have we been building?" The question was raw, uncertain. "Because from where Robert stands, it looks like I've replaced him with you, and maybe he's not entirely wrong." "You didn't replace anything. You made space in your life for people who wanted to be there." Brennan reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "I can't be Finn's father. Won't try to be. But I can be someone who shows up, who keeps promises, who treats him like he deserves. And if that makes Robert uncomfortable, maybe he should try being the father Finn needs instead of the obligation he resents." Reese's eyes filled with tears. "How are you so good at this? At knowing exactly what to say?" "I'm not. I'm making it up as I go, same as you." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away tears. "But I know what it's like to love a kid who's lost a parent, to want them to have everything they deserve even when you can't provide it all yourself. And I know that Harper's happier since Finn came into her life. So if being there for your son means being there for you too, I'm okay with that." She kissed him. Not tentative or questioning, but with the certainty of someone who'd stopped fighting what she wanted. Brennan kissed her back, pouring months of careful distance and growing connection into the moment. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, the world had shifted imperceptibly, but irrevocably. "I'm terrified." Her whisper was barely audible. Of this of us, of what it means if we actually try. Me too. His honesty matched hers. But being terrified and doing it anyway, that's what your father would have called character, right? She laughed, actually laughed, and kissed him again. 3 months later, Morrison Steel's quarterly earnings report showed the strongest performance in 6 years. Production efficiency up across all metrics, employee retention at record highs, new contracts secured with major manufacturers impressed by quality and reliability. The board meeting reviewing the results felt celebratory rather than combative. Douglas Hendricks raised a glass of bourbon contraband in company meetings, but tradition demanded exceptions. To Catherine Morrison, who proved that listening to the people who do the work is better strategy than any consultant can provide. The toast was echoed around the table. Reese accepted the praise with grace, but her eyes found Brennan's across the room, and what passed between them had nothing to do with quarterly earnings. The success brought opportunities. Trade publications wanted interviews, industry conferences requested speakers, competitors circled, wondering how Morrison had reversed its decline. Reese handled the attention with practiced professionalism, always redirecting credit to the workforce, to the culture of continuous improvement, to the value of treating workers as partners rather than expenses. Brennan's role evolved from Director of Operations Excellence to something more advisory, a bridge between executive strategy and production reality. He spent mornings in meetings, afternoons on the floor, and every decision filtered through the lens of how it would affect the workers building what Morrison sold. The real change happened in quieter moments. Weekend mornings when all 4 of them, Brennan, Reese, Harper, Finn, gathered in someone's kitchen for pancakes and chaos. School events attended together. Brennan and Reese navigating the complicated dance of 2 single parents, becoming something more while protecting their children from adult complexity. Louise watched it all with the satisfaction of someone who'd predicted this outcome from the beginning. Told you the universe gives second chances to people brave enough to take them. On a Saturday in late May, Brennan invited Reese and Finn to his workshop. Harper had claimed the afternoon for a friend's birthday party, leaving him with rare free time and a project he'd been working on for weeks. The workshop smelled like motor oil and sawdust, familiar comfort that Reese had learned to associate with Brennan's careful attention to detail. He led them to the center of the space, pulled a tarp off something large and gleaming. A 1967 Mustang Boss 429 restored to pristine condition sat under fluorescent lights like a sculpture. Reese's breath caught. "That's my father had one like this. Exact same year, same color. He sold it 15 years ago to fund an equipment upgrade." "This is that car." Brennan handed her the keys, the title. "I tracked it through 6 owners, bought it 3 months ago, spent every spare hour restoring it. Frank helped with the engine rebuild, Tommy with the bodywork. It's mechanically perfect, cosmetically pristine, and legally yours." She stared at the car at him, struggling to process the magnitude of what he'd done. "Why would you? This must have cost—" "You told me you lost your connection to your father when he got too busy running the company. This was the last piece of him that wasn't about Morrison Steel, it was just about a man who loved working with his hands." Brennan opened the driver's door, gestured for her to sit. "Thought maybe you'd like to have that back." Reese slid behind the wheel, hands trembling on the leather-wrapped steering wheel her father's hands had once gripped. The interior smelled like new leather and old memories. She started the engine, and the Boss 429's roar filled the workshop with American muscle and her father's ghost. Finn watched with wide eyes. "Grandpa George built this, restored it." Reese's voice was thick with emotion. "Took him 2 years working every weekend in a garage smaller than this one. He'd let me help, sometimes taught me how to change oil gap spark plugs, adjust carburetors. Said if I was going to run a manufacturing company someday, I needed to understand that everything worth building starts with someone's hands." She turned off the engine, sat in the sudden silence. "Brennan, I can't accept this. It's too much, too expensive, too—" "It's a gift." He crouched beside the car, meeting her eyes. "Not a transaction, not an obligation. Just something I wanted to do because you matter. Because Finn matters. Because watching you find your way back to who you are underneath the CEO armor has been—" He struggled for words. It's been the most important thing I've done besides raising Harper." Reese kissed him, uncaring that Finn was watching with a 7-year-old's knowing grin. "I love you. I'm terrified to say it, but I love you." "I love you too." The admission felt like diving off a cliff into water he couldn't see. "And I'm just as terrified, but I'm doing it anyway." Finn cleared his throat. "Are you guys getting married?" Both adults froze. We're not," Reese fumbled for age-appropriate answers. "Because Harper said you probably would. She said her dad smiles different now, and you laugh more, and when people love each other, they usually get married. Unless they're dumb about it." Finn delivered this wisdom with absolute seriousness. Brennan laughed. Actually laughed and pulled the ring from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. A simple band forged from Morrison Steel's first production batch, Frank had helped him source the metal, and a jeweler had crafted it into something elegant and strong. "I made this from steel your grandfather forged." He offered it to Reese. "Morrison Steel Vintage 1946, the year the company was founded. Frank helped me track down inventory from the original runs." Reese took the ring with shaking hands, held it up to the light. Etched inside the band, barely visible, were words, "Character makes the leader." "I know we've only been together a few months. I know this is fast and complicated and probably terrifies both of us." Brennan stayed crouched beside the car, putting himself at her mercy. "But I also know that Harper's happier than I've seen her since Sarah died. That Finn's thriving in ways he wasn't 6 months ago. That we're better together than we are apart. So I'm asking not because it's logical or prudent or what anyone expects, but because I want to build a life with you. Will you marry me?" Finn bounced on his toes. "Say yes, Mom. Say yes so we can be a real family." Reese looked at her son, at the man offering her a future built on steel and trust, at the car that connected her to a father she'd lost too soon. Every rational part of her brain screamed caution: too fast, too risky, too many ways it could fail. But she'd spent years being rational, being careful, protecting herself and Finn from the chaos of hope. "Yes," the word came out steady, sure. "Yes, I'll marry you." Brennan slid the ring onto her finger, and Finn cheered with the uninhibited joy of childhood. They stood in the workshop surrounded by tools and machinery, and the Mustang that bridged past and present, and for the first time since Robert left. Reese let herself believe in second chances. The wedding happened 6 months later in the most appropriate venue. Either could imagine Morrison Steel's production floor cleared and decorated, 200 workers and families gathered to witness the CEO and the mechanic make official what everyone had known for months. Frank Russo officiated, ordained online specifically for the occasion, his weathered face splitting with joy. Harper served as flower girl, scattering rose petals with the same enthusiasm she brought to everything. Finn carried the rings with solemn concentration, determined to execute his role perfectly. Louise Crawford wept openly in the front row, vindicated in her certainty that the universe knew what it was doing. Douglas Hendricks attended along with the entire board, and the sight of executives mingling with welders and maintenance crews felt like the fulfillment of George Morrison's original vision. A company where everyone's contribution mattered, where walls between management and labor existed only on organizational charts, not in respect and recognition. Reese wore a simple white dress, no veil, no train, nothing that would prevent her from moving freely through the crowd afterward. Brennan wore the suit he'd bought for the occasion, properly fitted this time, Frank's son having taken him to a real tailor with instructions to make him look worthy of the woman he was marrying. The vows were traditional but heartfelt promises about presence and partnership that resonated through the cavernous space. When Frank pronounced them married, the cheers from 200 throats echoed off steel rafters and concrete floors, a celebration of more than just one couple's happiness. At the reception, speeches ranged from sentimental to hilarious. Tommy Rizzo recounted the time Brennan had glued his hand to a wrench, much to Harper's delight. Margaret Hayes spoke about watching Reese transform from isolated CEO to someone who understood that strength came from connection. Louise simply stood and raised her glass. "I told them both they were getting a second chance. Thank God they were smart enough to take it." As evening deepened and the party wound down, Brennan found Reese standing near the hydraulic press, the machine that had started everything, the repair that had brought him to her attention, the catalyst for transformation that had saved a company and built a family. "Thank you." She leaned into him, exhausted and happy. "For seeing past the Ice Queen to whoever I was underneath. For being patient while I figured out how to be more than just my job. Thank you for opening your door during a storm, literally and metaphorically." He kissed her temple. "For taking a chance on a mechanic who thought he knew everything about fixing machines but nothing about fixing himself." Harper and Finn appeared both sugar-high from cake and the novelty of staying up past bedtime. "Can we go home now?" Harper yawned. "I'm tired." "Which home?" Finn looked between the adults. It was a fair question. In the months since the engagement, they'd been navigating the logistics of merging households. Reese's Fox Chapel Contemporary or Brennan's modest ranch in Penn Hills. They'd decided on something new, a compromise that honored both their histories while building fresh foundations. "Our home," Reese corrected gently. "The house we picked together that we're moving into next week. The one with the big backyard for compost bins and filter experiments and whatever other projects you two dream up. And the garage for the Mustang," Brennan added. "And the garage for the Mustang." She smiled. "Can't forget the important things." They left Morrison Steel that night as a family, 2 adults who'd found unexpected love, 2 children who'd gained siblings and stability, all of them bound by something stronger than paperwork or ceremony. The production floor would return to normal, Monday morning machines running and workers building, but the wedding had proven something George Morrison had always known. Companies thrive when people matter more than profits, when community trumps quarterly earnings, when leaders have the character to listen. In the truck on the way home, Harper fell asleep against Finn's shoulder, both kids lost to exhaustion and happiness. Reese watched them in the rearview mirror, and something in her expression made Brennan reach for her hand. No regrets. None. She laced their fingers together. "Though I'm still amazed this all started because my car broke down during a storm. Fate has a sense of humor. Or the universe really does give second chances to people brave enough to take them." They drove through Pittsburgh's darkened streets toward a house that would become home, toward a future built on steel and trust, and the revolutionary idea that work existed to support life, not replace it. Behind them, Morrison Steel stood solid against the night sky, 80 years of history, 200 families depending on its stability, and a new generation of leadership proving that American manufacturing could thrive when workers were partners, not expenses. Brennan had once told Harper that fixing things was his superpower. But he'd learned something these past months. Sometimes the most important repairs weren't to machines, but to lives, to hearts. To the belief that broken things could be whole again with patience and care, and someone willing to do the work. He pulled into their driveway, killed the engine, looked at his sleeping daughter and stepson, and the woman who'd transformed from intimidating CEO to partner in every sense. "Welcome home," Reese squeezed his hand. "Finally."